I am just driving home from a bonfire right now that a coworker of mine invited me to, and made me think of this topic that I wanted to discuss. Because at this bonfire, I didn't know anyone except for my coworker. Obviously, she was the one hosting it. But normally, in these types of situations where the one person knows everyone else, then it's a little hard for you to socialize because they got to entertain everyone, right? And so, if you're left out of the group, it's even worse in some circumstances where everyone else knows each other. But I was fortunate in that wasn't the case. The reason I want to bring this up is because I actually had a really good time. I managed to talk to people, which I want to say at this point in my life, the vast majority of it has not been the case. There are a few sort of standout moments where I can manage to introduce myself to other people or strike up a conversation, but it's pretty painful if I'm being completely honest. And I know this is something that a lot of people can relate to because I've heard friends, family, people express this all the time, or even online, you read comments about how difficult it is to sort of assimilate into a new group, I guess you could say. And so it got me thinking, what was the impetus that allowed me to sort of get around that? Like, how did I overcome that slightly? And I don't mean that in the sense of I'm a changed person. Like, it will always require some level of work. I think part of it was having that realization that it won't ever be totally effortless, at least not for me, someone who feels like they're naturally an introvert. But there are some tools that I've encountered or utilized that have made it a little bit easier. And you're probably going to laugh when you hear the explanation for it. So for those of you who have used TikTok or are familiar with it, you know that it tends to show you things that you already think or believe. It kind of validates your existing preconceived notions, be it for better or worse. There are some people who are naturally inclined to look at things that make them feel sad or increase their level of depression, and so when they get on TikTok, then that just gets amplified tenfold. Yeah. Same goes for people's political beliefs. Like, you tend to end up in an echo chamber where everything you believe gets repeated over and over until you have no reason to have any sort of rational conversation with your opponents. But anyways, that's besides the point. For me in particular, I'm someone who is a big consumer of motivational or self-improvement content. So I was kind of fortunate in that the things I was getting recommended were ironically things that were trying to get me off of TikTok, so to speak. And there are a few occasions where it actually works, right? Where the stuff that is meant to be good for you ends up being good for you and is kind of detrimental to the platform itself because it gets you off. By the way, I apologize for it being so dark. I haven't recorded a video in a few days. It's nighttime and I figured there's no excuse. I got to get one out there. So you get to see my gorgeous mug when I'm driving through the light. So anyways, so I was getting this self-help stuff, and then I was also getting the goofiest, most amazing memes I've ever seen, okay? For those of you who have heard of the looks maxing community or have gotten, supermodel edits or runway model edits, that was the type of stuff that was appearing on my page, okay? There's one model in particular. His name is Chico Lachowski, okay? So he's a super attractive guy, obviously, from Brazil. And I would get these edits. And, a quick aside, not only did this help me in my self-confidence, so to speak, it really got me to prioritize my personal health, okay, my my skincare, my hygiene, everything. I don't know. There's something really motivational and inspiring about seeing a good-looking guy, you know, kind of glow, right? That's really what it comes down to. The dude just glowed. Which leads into the next point I want to make, which was a question popped up into my head, and it was, what is it that makes this particular person so attractive, right? Because there's lots of people, guys and gals, who are insanely attractive. All you have to do is go on Instagram and scroll for a little bit, and you will see just how many unbelievably beautiful people there are. But they're not all the same, right? There are some qualities that certain people naturally have that others don't quite get, even though you might argue, well, one is more attractive than the other. There is something intrinsic about them that makes them stand out. And I think Chico is one of these people. So I was asking the question, what is it that makes him so attractive besides his looks? And I realized it was because of the way he sort of, is almost the way he just carried himself, right? Like, seems like someone who genuinely enjoys life. And you hear this time and time again. Like, they survey people, like, what are the most attractive traits that you find in a partner? It's usually like, they're funny, they have a good attitude, they're willing to do all sorts. And that all comes down to how you frame things. Like, what is your perspective in life? And so it kind of flipped a switch for me. Like, just looking at this dude smile in these runway shows, and obviously he's like being showered with affection, so it's easier to be that way, to sort of espouse that mindset. But I just thought, well, maybe if you find the reasons to enjoy things around you, to bring on a pleasant energy to not only yourself, but the people you spend time with, then you'll be a better person. Like, you'll actually feel better. So I guess you could say the gateway is, how good is your hygiene? How good is your personal care? What sort of things do you do on a daily basis to make yourself feel good? And then how do you just act good to the point that after a while, you feel good all the time, right? And I guess the reason why I'm explaining it this way, or there's a contrast I need to illustrate here real quick. And for the most part, the types of things I'm interested in are usually, like, I love alternative, or I would go even further. I'd say I really like dark gothic stuff. There was a phase in 2016 where I was obsessed with dark trap, and then when SoundCloud rap became a thing in 2017, 2018, then I found, and most of these things are by nature sort of negative. They're sort of depressing, and I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a sad person, but I don't know, I just I'm attracted to those things in some weird way. I love Edward Scissorhands. I like The Crow. The Crow's one of my favorite movies, despite it not being not one of the best movies, but it is for sure one of my favorite. And there, now you can see me a little bit. It's important I say this because I need to illustrate the contrast here. Because when you are growing up and your mindset is you're going to be this like mysterious, brooding person, because that's what you've seen in movies and television, and that's what you've heard in the music you've listened to, and it's supposed to be attractive, that doesn't always hit in the way that you want it to. I would say a better standard to aim for is, how can you just be the most enjoyable person to be around? Because that whole facade, it lasts temporarily, and a couple people might be sort of intrigued by this act that you're putting on. But then at the end of the day, you want to put yourself in their shoes. Like, how are they affected by your presence, you know? And the easiest way you can do that is to think about how the 5 closest people to you affect you when you're around them. Like, are they generally knowledgeable? Do you feel like you can turn to them for advice? Are they negative, pessimistic? Do you find after you spend time hanging out with them that you feel ickier or anything like that? Because once you sort of deduce that simple thing, you begin to realize, okay, there are kind of specific traits that lend themselves to being more attractive to be around, right? And it's just like having a good, and I'm not saying fake this, don't go out there and act all happy-go-lucky because someone on the internet told you to. No, it's like you have to do real work into reframing how you can have a more positive outcome. I think this sort of falls in line with what I've learned as an esports coach, where it's very natural, not just in gaming or esports, it's very natural for people to point blame, right? Like knee-jerk reaction is, I didn't do it, it's not my fault, it was someone else. Whether it was or not, they just do that by default. And if you can sort of reframe things as, well, how could I have avoided that situation? How could I have supported my team, my teammate? What adjustment could I have made to improve our chances of success? Not only does that help you feel more in control of your life, but it's actually one of the first traits that people find more attractive, because you don't sound like everyone else. You're not saying, well, if it had been me, or if such and such had happened a different way, then I would have, things would have turned out different. If you just instantly go, yeah, I see what went wrong, and here's actually how I messed up, and here's how I could have helped you better, that is instantly more comforting to someone else, right? It's more reliable. So you just got to take that concept and kind of transcend it into everything else, right? Into your daily life and how you act. Like, do you physically appear like someone who is willing to make something happen or to figure things out? It's not just about, everything sucks, this is all bad. It's like, well, how do we get out of the suck? That's the that's the real question. How do we get out of it? And you may not have the answer, like the end all be all, but at the very least, have a suggestion, okay? If you have a suggestion, you are light years ahead of most people, because they're not even thinking about these things. They're just thinking about how bad things are. And they haven't been told to even move on to that next step. So if you happen to stumble across this pitch black video and you've listened to it this far, I hope that serves a purpose for you, and you become 5% more sociable, 5% more pleasant to be around, because you realize that every problem you have has a solution that you can find. And if there are problems you have that don't have a solution, you just won't worry about them, because you can't control them until the time is right for those. Well, that's also a slippery slope too, because then people will say, well, I have no control over everything. That's not true. You actually do. It really comes down to you have control over how you think of the problem, okay? I can't control whether or not the sun rises tomorrow. And if I had a problem with that, well, I would have to reshape my way of thinking about it, because I'm not going to stop the sun. Right? If I was really so bent out of shape about that, I'd be having a tough time every single day. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that is of service to you. And go to bed, it's late. Have a great night. I'll see you in the next video.